Hi, and welcome to Cultivators Conversations. I'm your host, Jeff. I'm the community manager for the Cultivators community, and this episode is part two of a two-part conversation that I had with Kiante Miles, who's a poet, and he also started a poetry club for high school students while he was in college. In part one, we talked about that idea, how he brought it to life, and now in part two, we actually are going to have a conversation about his new idea for converting the poetry club into something that companies can use as part of their diversity and inclusion programs. Do you have any plans of what that next step is, when you might take that next step, or how you might do that? Because, right, the theme of this is making your idea happen. So you have an idea, and, you know, there's a book, actually, our CEO was co-author of, and in like the first 20 pages, it talks about, you ever see people who, I actually said this a couple of weeks ago on one of our live stream events, but you see people who see something great that happened, and they're like, oh, I had that idea first. Like, I thought of that years ago. But if you don't take action on it,
right,
then, you know, somebody else will, because it's a great idea. So yeah, what do you think your next step would be?
Yeah, I think our next step in this program would really be rethinking about, maybe it's revisiting, checking back in with our teachers. How many of them are still using the program?
That's true.
Right. Yeah. And if of the ones that are, how many of them are still at that same school? Right. And if they are they're at different schools, is there opportunity there to go to a new school, or, sister schools, rival schools of where we're kind of already plugged,
Right.
And really go in and kind of do a touch base, right? Did it work because I was only 2 years removed from college, and they saw me still as cool, the high school student, or now that I'm
think
like,
they might see you still as cool, right?
have a 9 to 5, does that make me like less cool in their eyes and stuff like that? So I really think it's seeing where students are, because I know where kind of like people my age are. But I mean, I even think,
well, is there an opportunity for that to, again, our community, I told you before we started recording, we have a lot of people interested in building culture at their workplace. Is even slam poetry a way to do that? I mean, I could think of a lot of our HR or people ops type people looking at this as this, they're looking for creative or new, fresh ideas rather than your cliche, right, ways to show diversity, inclusion, or whatnot. And maybe this is a good way. I could see that being a really neat program at companies.
Yeah, and so I'm glad you brought that up, because towards the end of our that summer went by way too fast. We had so many things that we were trying to get done, and so many ideas, and it's hard to build essentially kind of like a nonprofit program in just a summer. But one of the ideas is like, okay, how are we going to make this sustainable? How are we going to make it so economically, like money-wise, like it can bring in money to support itself, right? It's like book sales. So what we were doing, I didn't add this part in too. So we would take the students' works if they wanted to, and we would self-publish a book for them. So they would have a collection of their work, and they can say that they're a published poet and just kind of have that recognition. And so we're like, well, we want to do that. You do make some money from books, but not enough to support a whole program, right? Nearly enough. Very few books do. And so the other side of that was, okay, we can kind of break this into two parts. The nonprofit help schools, help high school students, help the youth type. And then we can also be a diversity training for companies who have money, and use that to kind of fuel the other side. Yeah. And so I think long term, for this to work, it's going to have to take that sort of approach, which you're still doing good work and you're still helping people. And so I don't think that that was always our mentor at the time was always had a hard time. He's like, Kiante, I know you always want to do stuff for free, but you can't.
It's your heart. Your heart gets in the way, right? Your passion.
Like, no, but I don't want to charge people. Like, why charge? Like, everyone should have this. They're like, I know everyone should, but you have to have money coming in from somewhere. And so
that's how we know you're a real artist, right?
That's what I just feel like, especially when I see things coming up, like my professor in college She's in the American Studies department. Duchess Harris, she's really, really big name in her field. But she took action on her own. She got tired of having college students who weren't able to talk about like really like deep or race or like deep things like race or, what is the middle class? Like all these things, students just were like silent because they didn't have enough, knowledge or around these issues. And so she got tired of it. So she wrote a whole selection of middle school books out there for over like voting rights and race and the middle class. And so I'm like, man, even in college, this is something that we're struggling to do, is to have these deep kind of conflicting conversations in a healthy manner, right?
Yeah.
And even around the workplaces.
I think,
like you said, like diversity training is huge right now. And it's like, how are those being facilitated? I've had one at my company and it was really well done, but I'm like, it's easy for me to believe that there's a lot that aren't being well done.
Right.
Sadly.
Right. Because I mean, it's a difficult conversation in the workplace too, right? Because you don't know how, a lot of people don't know how to have the conversation, and that's not a knock on people, right? Because we are in a current time in society where anything you say could be taken not necessarily the way you intended it to be, right?
Yes.
And so I think, we might be in a situation right now where, through, a slam poetry experience, people can, that's a way to learn. Because I've always felt that to me, what I would respond to best is with, say a sensitivity training or a diversity inclusion type training, is rather than talk about, a current event that's happening and how it makes people feel, I'd rather learn a culture, right? Yeah. So if somebody's a member of a culture, then teach me about your culture. What makes you proud of that? What the elements of that culture are? Because I think the more we understand each other's cultures and appreciate and respect those cultures, then we'll appreciate and respect where the people are coming from. It's my own 2 cents.
No, I agree with you. I think a lot of times what I've learned just being around a lot of different people with a lot of different thoughts and stuff like that, if, this is the big, I might be mirrored, so this might be backwards. Anywho, if you on one end, you have, the event, right? Something that just happened that, everyone knows about, right? But there's usually in everything in life, there's tons of things that have led to that event. And so if you're trying to start at that event and then go backwards, I feel like people have a really hard time trying to go backwards rather than if you start backwards and then walk them forward.
Right. That's true too. You're right, because if you start with the event, you're asking for almost a leap of faith, right? It's that, how can you ascribe whatever to that one thing? Well, because it was not that one thing. That's right. What's the old cliche? The straw. That was the straw that broke the camel's back, perhaps. So there's a lot of straws in that pile of hay.
Right. Start them on that path. It's kind of like a snowball effect, and then you can kind of just let them go, and then they'll be like, "Oh, okay, that's." Oh, and then they start looking at other things that are happening in day-to-day life, and they're like, "Oh, okay." And so it's really hard to, see things when you're just here. You have to go here to be able to see back here clearly.
Right. Absolutely. So I think you are. We've talked before. I know a little bit about how I feel about you. I think you are a tremendous artist. You're a tremendous person. I think you're inspiring. I think you have great ideas. I want you to make them all happen. Obviously, if you want to join the Cultivators community, you're welcome to do so and be a force in there as well. You might find you may connect with people who can help you make your idea happen, or help shape it into where it goes. But I will say at this point, if you have any final thoughts that you want to share with anybody, inspiring words or anything to shamelessly self-promote?
No, the only thing I would say is that thanks for having me on. Thanks for creating these types of space. I think really just I think communications, and I think I said this last time we talked, is that communications are really just the starting point for everything in life. Any good thing really just starts with the conversation. Any great idea starts with a conversation. And so being able to create spaces for people to have those conversations, I think is super important. So appreciative of you for having them and everyone listening to these conversations.
Yeah. Absolutely. Again, what I love about this community is because you have a lot of people having a lot of conversations nowadays. This is a community of people who take that conversation and turn it into action. And that's the right. But you're right. The first step is to have the conversation. And that's what we're, here to do too. All right. In that time, I will say, or at this time, I will say that I want to thank everybody for watching. Those of you who are watching our Cultivators Conversations, thank Kiante Miles for showing up and having this conversation with us. We may have another one in the future. Maybe we'll get you to present at one of our events as well. Okay. In the meantime, for those of you watching who aren't members of the Cultivators community and you are a change maker, you're someone who challenges the status quo, you have ideas, you want to really cultivate culture at your place of work, and you want to join our community, go to cultivateall.com/cultivators.